evening, Neil.
Hi, Trina.
Hi, you okay?
Trina, you might still be on mute. Oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, is it me? That's it.
Yeah. Okay. You okay?
Very, very well, Trina. Very well indeed. Yourself?
Good. I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see a good number of you logged on to see the guest lecture live. And I'm very pleased to welcome Neil McWilliams, who is going to provide the guest lecture this evening. So, Neil, if it's all right with you, I'll just hand over and let you go with it.
Great. So, hold on, let me just quickly share my screen.
Okay.
Share screen. Yeah. Great. Has everybody got that? Trina, can you see that on the screen?
Yep, can do, Neil. Yep.
Yeah, we can see.
Fantastic. So, is it the six of you? Is it five and yourself, Trina, or am I missing a whole group?
There's 15 people on the call altogether.
Oh, right. Sorry. Hold on. Let me. Here we go. When I get it right. Great. Well, I'll fire away if that's all right. Well, thank you. Thanks for Trina, as always, for inviting me. Just a quick introduction to myself. So, I'm going to go back 30 years ago. I used to work at the ICSA, as it was back then, and I was part of the team that developed the Certificate in Company Secretarial Practice and Share Registration Practice. I then left ICSA, went off into industry, a range of things, and a couple of years ago, I returned to help Kensington College, and I helped to revamp the course. The book that you have, I wrote. So I'm responsible for those mistakes, anything that you come across in there. I also actually write your exam papers. So I've written all the exam questions that you'll be studying and all the assignments. And so corporate governance is my area, and it is always great to come back to talk about corporate governance, because to me, I think it's the most important of a part, irrespective of whether you work in share registration or company secretarial practices, or whether you work in PLCs, private limited companies, or not-for-profit organisation. Corporate governance and governance is, in my opinion, the most important, but also, I think, the most exciting. Now, it's a guest lecture, so what I am going to do is we're just going to go through a couple of the issues in corporate governance, just a little bit of background in corporate governance, which are the kind of areas that from your learning, the manual. I'm just going to go over those. They're the kind of areas that will come up in your examination. Sorry, not will come up, might come up in your examination. And then I'm going to share with you a story. And and all I want you guys to do is to sit back and enjoy the story, enjoy the point. After this, and first thing tomorrow morning, all of the slides that we're looking at today and the full story will be available on Moodle for you. So, so all the notes that you want. If at any point you want to ask a question, please make me aware, put it in the chat, and very, very happy to answer the questions. And after this, there'll also be a little bit of time at the end when we can actually talk, answer your questions, but talk through any points that you might have about the areas in corporate governance. So, just to start, I mean, the book that I've written gives a number of definitions of corporate governance, but there's an OECD one, there's a number of others, but I always tend to go back to the 1992 one from the Cadbury Commission, which was the Cadbury Commission followed the collapse of Maxwell and Maxwell Communications Company back in 1990. And that was really the start of really corporate governance and the approach to corporate governance that we know today. But it's all about the system by which companies are directed and controlled, and that's really at the heart of it. Importantly, it's the directors that are responsible for governance of their companies, and the shareholders' role is to appoint the directors, but also to appoint auditors. And the role of the auditors is to satisfy themselves that the appropriate governance structures are in place. And we're going to talk a little bit about the auditors' role later on. So the responsibility of the board, setting the strategic aims, the leadership, and essentially the stewardship of the company. So that's the definition. And what we have in corporate governance, of course, at the centre, we have the board with a relationship and a responsibility to the shareholders, and not just the shareholders, but also other stakeholders. And this is becoming increasingly more important. Other stakeholders might include employees, suppliers, local community, government, a whole range of stakeholders. And what you're seeing at the minute, and particularly in, I suppose, corporate governance models in South Africa, for example, you're seeing this enlightened corporate governance policies that make companies answerable to all stakeholders on an equal basis, never quite equal because shareholders, but they're always consideration for all stakeholders. And there's a lot of initiatives going on in this country that other stakeholders should be considered alongside shareholders as well. And then, of course, there's the role of the company secretary or the corporate governance professional, whose role is to support the board, advise the board on their governance responsibilities. But of course, the company secretary doesn't have the overall responsibility for corporate governance within a company. So at the very heart of corporate governance, there is what we call the agency theory. And basically, it's the theory that the owners of a company can be separate to those running the company. And that is, of course, always the case in PLCs, where there is multiple, often hundreds of thousands of shareholders, and the company is being run on their behalf. Now, of course, there can be pension funds, investment companies that might own large batches of the stock. But they're essentially, whichever way we look, there's a separation between the control and ownership. And there is, of course, a few examples of FTSE 100 and 250 companies where control sits with an individual. An example of that would be Sport Direct, where Mike Ashley owns more than 50% of the company, which essentially gives him control. But generally, we're looking at the owners being separate from the managers, the management. So what the agency theory is, it's about aligning the interests of the owner and the manager. And the conflict is, just to give you an example, is that the manager his interest is from a benefit from their position rather than the rise in the share price. So they're always looking for a salary. And I'll give you an example. Well, there's a theory that says is the more people that you manage, the higher your salary will be. The bigger the size of the company, the higher your salary will be. So what that means is it can often be in the interest of a manager to recruit more staff. It could be in the interest of a company to acquire more companies, make the company bigger. Whereas the shareholder might be looking to take money from the business in the form of a dividend, so that the profits from the business will be distributed back to the owners. So it's money leaving the business. So what happens is the shareholder often wants to get their receive a return on their money through a dividend. The managers of the company actually want to spend that dividend and make the company bigger, take on more staff to get because that way they'll receive bigger benefit from the company. So somehow what happens is these need to be aligned, and how they're aligned usually is things like the remuneration policies of the company by incentivizing the management through share price, for example, by the dividends and the size of the dividends. So you're aligning the interests of both sides, and that's when we sometimes have problems, as we're going to go on to talk about. But there's a few principles of corporate governance, and they're the same throughout the world. It's all about fairness, ethical behavior, being accountable for the decisions, being responsible, so for accepting the powers. And the biggest thing is actually being transparent, being open and providing clear information to shareholders and other stakeholders. Now, when we look at this, when I go through the story, and maybe tomorrow, when you have these slides, just have a reread this slide, and you'll then really see the issues the key issues in corporate governance, because the story that I'm about to tell you covers each one of these. But the key issues is that, all about the board, the performance of the board, the relationship that the board has with its shareholders and other stakeholders, remuneration, as we've just been talking about, the financial report and the auditing, which is coming back to the issues of transparency. It's about the risk that companies are prepared to take, information and communications, and now and much more recently, but more becomes significantly more prevalent, is corporate social responsibility. So I've quickly gone through those. Please don't worry. They will all, as I say, if you come back to them after and even as we go through the story, they'll become clear. So in the UK, there is our corporate governance is for public limited companies is set out in the UK Corporate Governance Code, which is a guidance it's all about uses a process called a comply or explain. So basically, as part of the London Stock Exchange rules, they say to companies, you must comply with the UK Corporate Code, and if you don't, you must explain why. And just as an example, one of the requirements or the guidelines from the UK Corporate Code, which came about from the Cadbury report back in 1992, is that the chairman and the chief executive should be different people. And this comes back to, all the power being held within a single person. So, and the chairman maybe should be a non-executive. So, thereby creating a checks and balances of a process. So that's the UK corporate code, and we can have a little chat. But the arguments for corporate governance is all about eliminating the risk of misleading investors with false financial reporting. It reduces the risk of scandals and corporate failure, and it supports the reputation of companies. But what I would just say, and just going back to that, and I'm going to touch again on it a little bit later on, is that quite often people see corporate governance as a compliance, and it's all about complying with rules. But at the heart of corporate governance, it's actually something very different. It's actually about when we talked about how companies are directed and controlled. It's actually more about the culture of an organisation. It's actually about how companies operate ethically, and you shouldn't need a stick of legislation to be operating in that way. But what happens is when you give arguments to companies about corporate governance, of course, everything is based on, after the event. So when companies fail, say it had poor corporate governance. But if, of course, you'd said to a company before they failed, that you have poor corporate, you question someone's corporate governance, they will turn around and say, there's nothing wrong with our corporate governance. We're complying with the rules. Our corporate governance is fine. We have non-executive directors. It's only actually after a company has failed that these get picked up. And I think what is important is that the whole corporate governance a debate is actually moved, rather than be to stop companies failing, to reduce the risk of scandals and corporate failure, but actually turn the narrative around and say good corporate governance means better companies, means better run companies, means better performance, means better results. And that really should be the argument, rather than the arguments of it stops companies or reduces the risk of companies failing. So we're going to go on and we're going to talk about a story. So as I said, if you've got any questions, but I can't, Trina, I can't see my, while I'm sharing the screen, my comment box hasn't actually come up. So
don't worry, Neil. I've got it open on my screen, so I can field questions and highlight those to you as any come in.
Brilliant, thank you. And Trina, do you actually agree with with the point about corporate governance, about changing the narrative rather than it actually being much less about reducing risk of scandals, but actually good corporate governance leads to better performance in companies?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. There's always that element that it should and does reduce that risk because of the Yeah, there's a standard, and that's expected by certain people, particularly shareholders and institutional investors.
Absolutely, and I think so often, I think what happens is I hate the idea that company secretaries, corporate governance professionals are just seen as some kind of compliance function within the company, because they're not. They're actually adding value to the whole corporate governance process, but it's much more than compliance, as we're going to look at. So I'm going to tell you a story. Sit back, enjoy this story. I don't know how many of you will have heard. Many of you would have heard of Enron, but it's something else. Understanding the full story, and I think that what I find, and it's the story is 20 years old, and it's interesting. It's interesting because the point that I'm going to make at the end of this story is to say, do you foresee the same situation happening again? Right? So we're 20 years on, all the legislation, all the history that will have happened since then. Could you foresee this situation happening again? So whilst I tell the story, just think about that. Maybe if you think about your own companies, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a listed company or a not-for-profit company, you will see what I mean. So the story is about Enron. Just to give you a bit of background on Enron, Enron was a natural gas and electricity seller in the US. Started in 1985, but by 1992, I think they were something like the second biggest seller of natural gas, trading natural gas in the US, earning 122 million pounds a year. So not massive. But they were very, very ambitious as a company. So they actually very quickly pursued a diversification strategy. So they were buying things like electricity plants, pulp and paper plants, water plants, and also broadband. And they were offering those services around the world. And the company, the chief executive was a guy called Jeff Skilling. The company was originally founded by its chairman, Kenneth Lay. The chief financial officer was Andrew Fastow. And in addition to these guys, there was 15 non-executive directors. And amongst them, there were people that served as CEOs in several companies, bank executives. There was experts in gas and oil. There was 2 doctors. One member served as an MP in British Parliament. There was members with expertise in anti-regulatory legislation. There was those from expertise in Asia, Europe, South America, Africa, Middle East. One was an elder in a Presbyterian church. And together, these 15 directors had actually served on 130 different boards of profit and not-for-profit organisation. And so there is a book on this story, which is called The Smartest Guys in the Room. This group of people was dubbed to be the smartest board that could ever be assembled in the US. The expertise of this board was absolutely second to none. I think it is probably worth just saying though on the board. Let's go back. One of the things about the board, which is they, as an incentive for them to join the board, they were given significant shares. And in addition to that, they received, each of them, $300,000 each for their board services. So probably a couple of days a month of work. And so if we look at their performance from 1984, it's actually, in the end, it's about 2000 where it goes up. I must have cut that off. But between 1990 and 1998, right, the shares were a 311% increase. Now, just to put that into context, that was the average standard of Standard & Poor's 500 index was around the same figure. So that's just saying that they were kind of, their performance in the share price was about the same as any other of the 500 companies in the US. Then you see 1999, it increased by 56%, 87% in 2000. So all of a sudden, the company is then outperforming the rest of the Standard & Poor's, their version of our FTSE. And the market capitalization becomes $60 billion. Now, I won't get into the complicated financials, but the asset value or the balance sheet value of the company at that time was under 10 billion, right? So was under 1 billion. Sorry. What I'm saying is the market capitalization, the share price, is basically 70 times more than its profit, and it's about 6 times more than its book value, right? So what that means is that when a company is trading at 70 times its profit, it's based on the expectation of that company. So it's based on its future, what the expectation of investors were that company would do. So when you are, I'm going to say in a normal company in the UK, you would be expecting for a company maybe 4 or 5 times at best. 70 times is basically saying that in a short period of time, that the profits of the company will become 70 times more than they currently are, just to meet the expectation of investors. So it's very, very significant when a company's share price is significantly, its capitalization is significantly outperforming its actual situation. So what happens when it is the company, the expectation of investors are creating a lot of pressure onto the company to perform. Companies have to this company has to keep performing at a higher and higher level to keep meeting the expectation of the investors. And if you're honest, that's got to be in the end impossible to do. So every year you need to do better than the previous year just to keep up with the expectation. So what then happens is basically the company starts to use a range of different methods. Now, one of these methods was that if you created a contract, and let's say a contract for a gas contract, for example, and you sold a gas contract that was going to take 10 years. There is a model that says that you can actually understand what the profits are going to be over 10 years, and you could actually count that as profit now, right? Even though you've never ever received the money, right? We wouldn't necessarily generally do that in this country, but it's an accounting policy, it's an accounting model that was perfectly legal. And the company even went as far as actually checking that it was legal at the time. So I'll give you an example of that. What happened was Enron did a deal with a company called Blockbusters. Now, I'm going to guess that many of you are you're too young to know Blockbusters. Tina, we remember Blockbusters well, and what actually happened in Blockbusters? Blockbusters was, of course, rental of videotapes. You go to a shop, you pick your film, you rent the tape, bring it home, put it into your cassette, and watch it. But this was the beginning of broadband. So there was now this option that maybe you could start watching videos at home through the broadband. They did a deal with Blockbusters and tried to be the first people to deliver videos via broadband, via the internet at home. And as a result of that, as a result of the contract, Enron decided that over a 10-year period, that was going to deliver about, I think it was 100, 200, 110 million. It was going to give them $110 million. And so what they did in this year's accounts, in this particular year's accounts, they booked $110 million of revenue, but Blockbuster pulled out of the deal before it even started. So all of a sudden, we've got this situation of Enron with 110 millions of revenue that will never, ever happen. But it was booked into the account. And that is just one example of what happened. And again, I'm telling you, say none of this was illegal. There's nothing that's illegal. Now, I'm also going to then give you another example. On the screen, the special purpose entity, and they were the masters of the special purpose entity, because as things became more difficult, as they're trying to sustain the share price, as they need to get more profits, as they need to get more revenue, what they did was they would take, and in this situation, it was a Polish power plant, right, which they sold to a special purpose vehicle that was owned by NatWest Bank, Citicorp, and Chase National Bank, that each put in close to $10 million. And then the power plant was sold to them. In 30 days later, it was bought back by the same company, Enron. And of course, NatWest got their money plus 1.6 million pounds, and there was no risk to them, of course, because Enron had already guaranteed it. And and the chief financial officer took £1 million in management fees for that. And the situation of that is that Enron still owns its power plant, but now it's got 30 million extra profits in its accounts, but it basically paid £1.6 million for those profits, but those profits actually weren't real. There was no nothing actually happened. So it was a very, I don't want to get too tied into this, it was a very, very complicated situation that they were engendering right throughout the companies whilst they're chasing revenue. But and as I say, don't worry if you don't understand that is not the point of the story. It's these were things. It was a very, very complicated process of accounts that they were using. Now, so their auditor was a company called Arthur Andersen. It was based in it was the Houston office in Texas, and they received $25 million in the audit fees, but they also received $27 million in consulting fees. Right. So what actually is happening is the same company that is consulting, providing consultancy services around our accounting policies and practices of the company is also the same company that the shareholders are relying on to audit that company to tell us that, and to tell the investors that everything is okay. At the same time, that's over £50 million of the revenue accounted for over a quarter of the revenue from the Andersen's Houston office. So imagine what would happen if they lost that account. So there was permanently this pressure that Andersen were put under to say, I suppose there's two pressures. The first is the conflict of interest. What they're doing is they're saying to a company, yes, it's fine to use these processes, these accounting policies, and then the audit fee the audit partners can't really say anything about that because they're from the same company, and the pressure was to agree it. And then what would actually happen is, when Andersen were in the sometimes having meetings with the board, the Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Fastow, would get some of his staff to walk through competing accountancy companies, have them in the office at the same time, so that Andersen were permanently thinking that they were going to be replaced. So it kept putting pressure on them to say everything is okay. So massive conflict of interest for the auditors. The very, very significant part of the shareholders' confidence in the companies. So then in 2001, there was an article in Fortune magazine titled "Is Enron Overpriced?" Well, at 70 times its market with its market capitalization, 70 times its profit, it is definitely overpriced. Anybody that's suggesting it wouldn't would be crazy. So the questions were about how Enron could, I suppose, maintain the kind of share price that was existing at the time. And then there was this suggestion about this erratic cash flow, this huge debt. Well, of course there was an erratic cash flow, because at times they were booking profits that there wasn't the cash flow for. It was lending, a lot of money. But the whole time Enron kept on saying, look, we're not going to reveal our earnings details because we don't want our competitors to know what we're doing. Well, it was, might have been more to do with we don't want to tell the shareholders actually what we're doing. So as time passed, there was some significant problems, but and Jeff Skilling actually resigned. Kenneth Lay said that he actually resigned, but I think he sold £33 million worth of shares in the week before he resigned. Kenneth Lay, who was the chairman, said, I'm going to take over the chief executive position. There's nothing to worry about at all. The board is asking some questions. Is everything okay? Kenneth Lay saying, don't worry at all. Everything is absolutely fine. We're about to have our best year ever. So on, I think, August the 15th of the same year, a lady called Sharon Watkins sent an anonymous letter to Lay, warning him about the company's accounting practices. She says, I am incredibly nervous that we will implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She contacted a friend who worked for Arthur Andersen, drafted a memorandum about all the points, and she met with Lay. She gave him the 6-page letter, and Lay at that time vowed to have the company's law firm, Vincent and Elkins, review the issues. She argued that using the company's existing law firm was a conflict of interest. They decided against it, against her views. Got the in-house lawyers, and they at first their response was that they wanted to sack Sharon Watkins, but then they changed their mind, thinking that it would cause too much of a loss. It would probably cause a lawsuits. But subsequently, the law firm announced that Enron had done nothing wrong in its accounting practices, and that Arthur Andersen had approved each of the issues. Oh dear. By October 2001, the share price had decreased to $20 after an announcement by the SEC that it was investigating some suspicious deals. 2 days later, Enron stock was trading at $16. In an effort to calm investor fears, Enron tried to depleted all its lines of credit by trying to buy up its own shares. They tried to find a buyer for the company, which was a company called Dynegy, another energy company. They voted to acquire it at $8. They were pricing it at £8 billion. They pulled out, and as a result, shares ceased trading. And by December the 2nd, Enron became the largest bankruptcy in US history at that time, obviously since 2008, and the Lehman Brothers. There'll be some bigger bankruptcies, but at the time, this was the biggest. So the employees were either given 30 minutes to vacate the building, 62%. And that's 15,000 people lost their jobs immediately. And nearly 62% of them had savings plans, had pension plans that were based on an Enron stock that had been purchased at $83 and was now actually worthless. So not only had they lost their jobs, they actually had lost all their savings, their pensions. So yes, so I've said there, yes, 15,000 Enron employees, but at the same time, Arthur Andersen was found guilty of obstruction of justice for shredding thousands of documents, deleting emails. And even though it was only a very small number of Arthur Andersen employees, and the firm was effectively put out of business. 85,000 people from Arthur Andersen lost their jobs. There was in amongst those there was 21 people found guilty of crimes committed, and 16 of those pleaded guilty, including the staff at Arthur Andersen. All was worth talking about then what happened to Kenneth Lay. He was sentenced to 45 years in jail. However, before sentencing, he died, and so served none. Jeff Skilling was convicted of 19 of 28 counts of securities fraud, and he was sentenced to 24 years in prison, and he's actually he was released from prison a few years ago. Andrew Fastow pleaded to 2 charges. He got 10 years, or based on a plea bargain, which he testified against Jeff Skilling and Kenneth Lay. His wife was also sentenced for 1 year in prison for helping hide the income. So, look, that's a quick story. There is actually a film on it. There's also the book, which is called The Smartest Guys in the Room. Unfortunately, I think it's a great story. But it was written by I think it's a New York Times magazine. Unfortunately, what happened, the story was actually published before it went to trial. So what you don't actually see is what happens at the end of it and what happened to Arthur Andersen. But it certainly sets out the story, and the film is there. The film is on Netflix. The same story, and I think look, we go through this, and you start at the beginning, and it was essentially the story of greed. It's the story of the companies that how a culture within an organization about a risk. If we start looking at some of those issues that were there, that there was no oversight. The oversight, the shareholders were employing non-executive directors, but the non-executive directors were being paid $300,000 a year, and were getting shares that had risen to $85, $86. So it wasn't in their interest to be ruffling things. They were aligned with the Kenneth Lay, Jeff Skilling, and Andrew Fastow. So the auditors who were should have been giving a true and fair picture of the accounts were not doing that, and the outcome was 85, over 100,000 people losing their livelihoods as a result of that. And I think, if we just very, very quickly go back to that corporate, the UK Corporate Governance Code, if I just go through any areas that I've, highlighted and read, is areas, and don't have a look at this when you have a look at the slides, but these are areas where the company was not following, what are now the guidelines. Of course, these weren't the guidelines at the time. Just under E there, the workforce should be able to raise matters of concern. We know what the rules now are on whistleblowing. What happened here? They were trying to sack her for blowing the whistle on this. There wasn't a policy in place that was able to follow that. The board should establish its purpose, values, and strategy. All directors must act with integrity. Look at what happened. Sells $33 million before he resigns and runs off. Responsibilities that there of the non-executive directors meeting. The composition of the board, audit, look, all red. Remuneration designed to, the long-term growth. So, anything that could have possibly have gone wrong in corporate governance actually went wrong. It's a fantastic example of all the things conspiring together to go wrong. Camilla, you've got a question, please.
I have, Neil. Thank you. That was really, really interesting. I hadn't appreciated the sequence of events and how that escalated. I guess what I'm quite interested in is the very first point you made about the over forecast market capitalisation and the expectations in the market that they were going to do incredibly well. Just based on your understanding of the story, was that a combination of things in terms of the company's communication to the market? How did that expectation get so out of control?
That's a very, very good question about so absolutely, because everything in this situation is based on the share price. Everything is set up for the share price, because that's where the board as well as the shareholders are gaining value. So communication was a very, very important part of that, Camilla. You're absolutely right. And I think that what was interesting, what was at the point where, Jeff Skilling clearly he knows that things have going very, very badly wrong. And he resigned, sold his shares. And at that point, Ken Lay's response to that was, we're going to have our best year ever. So, and I'm going to carry on with your point, because I think it's really, really important one. So my question is here is, can another Enron happen? That's probably wrong. Can Enron happen again? Probably should be. So the question is, and let's talk about the UK. I saw quite an interesting. There's an interesting 4-part documentary. Might have been Sky, might have been Amazon Prime, could have been Netflix, it was about Maxwell, and it's just come to the fore because, of course, his daughter is in prison in the US. And I think it was a 4-parter, and 2 of the parts were about Maxwell, which actually started the corporate governance. And if you watch that, watch again everything about the corporate governance, everything about the non-executive directors, everything about who happen to be sons, spending the pension money, propping up the share price of the company. So it was quite important. But please watch that. But my question is, if anybody's got a view on this, can this situation happen again? Does anybody, could anyone see something like this happening? Well, I'm going to give an example of a company that is that's actually being investigated at this minute. The findings of this haven't come out. But the company in the UK is Carillion. Carillion in 2017. So that's now on less than 5 years ago. This situation. Now, in the 2016 report and accounts, Carillion's was making tomorrow a better place, right? That was the strap line. And I'm just going to say a couple of the issues that we saw with Carillion. The accounts were signed off on a going concern basis on the 1st of March 2017. By the 10th of July, less than March, April, May, June, July, 4 months later, they're writing down 845 million pounds. The issuing profit warnings. The share price plunged 39%, and 5 months later, just 5 months, so 9 months, the company was forced into compulsory liquidation with debts of £1.5 billion with 29 million cash in the bank. It was a FTSE 250 company. The repercussions were that 43,000 employees lost their jobs, 28,000 had pension scheme members, and then, of course, subcontractors, creditors, and local communities, customers. And the ultimately responsibility of those were the board again. And the questions that are being asked of the board is why the board would actually would take so many risks. So it was clear that the business model at that point wasn't working, and the company could not meet its liabilities as therefore became due over the 3-year period. But the non-executive directors and and especially those that should have a finance accounting experience, which should be on the board, should have been able to question the issue, should have actually had been able to question the risks that were being taken by the company. Now, the biggest issue I think that is going to, I suppose, come out is of the Carillion is going to be the audit performance. And again, this is what we're seeing. We saw with Arthur Andersen. The role was undertaken by a KPMG, who gave them a clean bill of health. They're obviously now being investigated by the financial regulatory committee, and they are looking at 3 areas. They're looking at the going concern basis of accounts. So, did the company actually have the ability to pay its bills as they become due? They're also looking at revenue recognition, exactly the same issue that we've just looked at in Enron, and they're also looking at accounting the profession for the pension scheme. And we're seeing at the minute an investigation that is going to continue to happen about what the government is going to do about our audit in the UK, because of course it's dominated by 4 companies. And just out of interest, the Carillion KPMG had been the auditor for Carillion for 19 years. And the last 3 finance directors were all ex-partners from KPMG. So at the minute, there's an investigation into the audit, and some of the suggestions are going to be about that is about audit rotation, about putting it out to tender after between 4 and 7 years, and as well as a whole wave of other rules. So back to Camilla, back to your point. There you had Carillion communicating, saying that what did I say? It was to making tomorrow a better place. One of the areas that they're being investigated for in terms of their board behaviour was handling bad news. The board's communication and messaging to the market remained upbeat right up until the first profit warning. It's hard to detect any hint of the troubles to come from reading the 2016 report and accounts. The AGM was held less than 10 weeks before the profit warning without an adverse comment. And of course, it's not in their interest to make an adverse comment because of the effect that it would have on the stock market to do so. So, yes, my question was, can another Enron happen? Well, to one extent it did. In Carillion, there is plenty more issues that arising, and I hope that now, through this course, that you may, whenever you read something in the business pages, you'll say, yes, that's a director's remuneration problem. That's a corporate governance issue, and when you understand that, you'll be very, very shocked at actually how many happen. But I come back to my point at the very beginning and the role of the company secretary. The role of the company secretary is there to support the board, but in supporting the board, it is it's very important that the corporate governance is positioned as something that benefits the company, that will provide help with better performance for the company, rather than it's all about stopping a company failing, because it won't. Because the only way that in these situations is everything is about a culture. Everything is about a culture at the top. It's about culture of the organization, about greed, about the people. And in my opinion, we're going to see the same, coming in the outcome of Carillion, about why the directors made the decisions that they did. This isn't incompetence. These are very highly skilled, experienced individuals that have been running these companies. It's not about competence. It's actually it's about creating a culture, and the culture being about greed within the organisation. That's my views. Anyway, so I don't know how long. God, I don't know how long I've been talking for. An hour. Please, has anyone got any comments, views to make before we all go and enjoy the rest of our evenings tonight?
Any questions or comments from anyone?
Comments are equally valid as questions.
I've got just a quick sort of thought on it. So you say it's about greed, but I wonder if could it be about incompetence as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting point. I said that if you're looking at the executive directors, I don't believe that that's about incompetence. I believe that these are highly skilled people. I believe that the incompetence. I'm not going to use the word incompetent. I'm going to use the word about board performance now. And what I mean by board performance is the whole board working actually as it should. And the non-executive directors, remember, the role of non-executive directors is to challenge. Now, to challenge, there has to be a knowledge of and the culture of the board is going to allow that those challenges to happen. And I urge you, go back and watch the documentary on Maxwell. Maxwell actually, and I think the first report. The Cabin report actually, it wasn't. It was the DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry original report, called him an overbearing bully. Is what he was described as, and the basis of that was even the non-executive directors were too afraid to talk to raise any points because he was so. Julie, I think that your point about incompetence is a good one, because I think that you can argue that if your role is there to be as a non-executive director to challenge and you don't, that in itself is incompetent, because you should be speaking out. So I think that definitely not, in my opinion, the executive directors. I think the issue there, to an extent, was the transparency as well. The transparency that the non-executive directors couldn't actually see what was going on, and what they say. I think there was a wording in the book that says, where the Andrew Fastow has actually said, this is far too complicated for you guys. You don't need to concern yourself with it. What? Telling non-executive directors you don't need to concern yourself with this, and I think that was the situation. So, I mean, it's beyond incredulous that how that situation would happen with Enron, and again with Carillion, and are there more out there that we just don't know yet, because there's two companies are too busy telling us everything's okay. Laura, Sonia, sorry.
Thank you. This was really useful and very interesting discussion, and very interesting to learn about different cases. I'm quite puzzled how they were allowed to get away with it for so long. How the company secretary, if you want, or the legal counsel in the US didn't raise any concerns, or if they did, why was nothing done about it for so many years?
So I think that you can ask the same question of Maxwell back in the 90s. You can even ask the same questions about Carillion, about why was this not picked up? Why was this not stopped? There has been a number of failures in recent companies. I'm going to give you another one with Valerie Patisserie Valerie, and a whole host of companies where the auditors should have been picking matters up and haven't, and that's what has led to the government review at the minute. It's corporate governance and the ethical management of a company needs to pervade right through the company. And I think what you're seeing here is and even they're saying it in the Carillion, it's down to probably a handful of people that are able to somehow introduce the accounting schemes, but at no point did whilst the SEC actually later on went on to say that some of the went on to investigate some of the policies. The truth is that none of them were actually illegal. And so what is happening is in the book is that what they were good at was looking at interpreting the accounting policies by, in this country, it would be the FRC. So they were just good at, their argument is we're just using the rules to our advantage. But of course, it's, so when you say, why was it not picked up? They weren't doing anything illegal. I'd say culturally, I think it was immoral, what they were doing, but wasn't illegal. And in fact, in I think 1995, they won a Forbes magazine for corporate governance. To the outside eye, this was a great success story. But once again, look at the Maxwell. Look at what that was heralded as a success story, rescuing the New York, I think was it the New York Times, the New York Daily News, whatever the paper was. It was all about rescuing failing newspapers, and so we're heralding that as a as a success story. And it's not only until you really start looking at that. And of course, what happens when you get characters such as Jeff Skilling and Andrew Fastone, people will say they didn't understand me. This is how we need companies to operate. You need people like me at the helm who's not afraid to take risks and those kind of situations. So Sonia, I'm 100% with you, and I think the challenge that we have now is that that corporate governance must be able to pick up these issues, and especially within the audit process.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? So I'm wondering whether that is going to come up in the examination. I don't know, of course.
Everyone's wondering that, Neil.
But all I would say is when looking at these subjects, and this isn't me knowing something that's coming up soon, but what it is when you're revising or looking at these kind of subjects, do it backwards. So look at corporate governance. So look at a story like this and then say, and it helps you remember how everything went wrong. Think of this story now. When you look at corporate governance, what was corporate governance about? It was which was the areas that we looked at the beginning, it was about the board. It was about the performance of the board. It was about risk. It was about the culture of organizations. It was about the audit. It was about the transparency of organizations. And just remembering that story will help you remember each one of those issues. In fact, what I'll do. The key issues in corporate governance are the board and its performance, the stakeholder relations, directors' remuneration, financial report and auditing, risk, information and communication, ethical conduct, and corporate social responsibilities. So those are those issues. So all you ever need to do is, when it's talking about an examination, what the key issues in corporate governance, just think through this story. It's all there. Just a quick point from Claire McNeil. Strange that the shareholders didn't question the conflict of interest in both cases with the audit and the length of service for the auditors. Good. I'm 100% with you, and I mean I think that one of the look at the conflict of interests. I think there was a lot of conflict of interest here. The first one was the non-executive directors. The people that have been recruited to work on behalf of the shareholders were themselves incentivized essentially to go with the flow. The auditors, absolutely, the conflict of interest. And so since then, there is so there was a set of rules in the US, Sarbanes-Oxley, and of course here we have the UK Corporate Code, and as part of that, it now would be companies would not be able, audit firms would not be able to be undertaking consultancy within a company as well as the audit. So there's areas like that have changed, as a result. But the Carillion example, the rules do say that companies should put their audit out to tender every 10 years. And of course, we've just seen a situation of Carillion with 19 years. So
the other thing I'd add on that, Neil, as well, is the other part of that regulation is that where a company then puts the audit out to tender, you would normally include your current auditors within that tender process. And then it's quite reasonable that the company may decide, well, we're going to retain the auditors we've got.
Yeah.
The rules then say if you've had then the same auditor for 20 years, it is then mandatory to change the auditor.
That's right.
What
Yes.
surprises me, though, is that based on what we saw with Enron, what we've seen with Carillion, with the length of tenure of those auditors being 20 or near 20 years, why that mandatory change is set at 20 years, I think it's too long.
You're absolutely right. I was just reading there that Carillion have not put their audit out to tender since 1999. Yeah. So it was that, and I think that. But the point is that this is such a massive area, and just watch the news. Follow this. Read the governance and compliance monthly it's not monthly. It could be monthly magazine from Corporate Governance Institute online, and just follow this process, because it's going to be a very, very interesting one to see what happens and what rules. I think there's a concern in the last week that with everything that's going on with the government at this minute, but of course they're busy with there's the Ukraine, and there's a lot of significant issues. I think the concern has been in the last week it was set out in the Queen's speech that we were looking for legislation on this, and it's looking like the legislation about the audits might get bumped. And so there's some serious concerns at the minute around that. Great.
Hey, we had some. Thank you, everyone. Those that put in comments. Thank you. Many people there, Neil, saying really interesting. And thanking you for the presentation. As I always think, I find it interesting that we're, like Neil said, Enron's 20 years ago, we're still talking about it, but also sadly we are seeing similar things, and Sonia made a comment saying would like to think the world is learning from past mistakes. But I completely agree with you, Neil, about it is so often just a small group of people that one way or another have the power to be doing things like this, and for it to go unnoticed until it's too late.
I think you're absolutely right, but I think I think Enron is, as I say, is 20 years old. I keep on thinking, oh God, I've got to stop using that. But it's like the gift that keeps giving. I think that there is so many things wrong, and as you say, Trini, you kind of keep thinking, oh no, it's not going to, it's not going to happen again. We must have learned, as Sonia said, we must have learned from that. But my God, Trina, you know as well as I do, we have. But that is the fantastic thing for us all about being part of the Corporate Governance Institute, because it's this amazing opportunity for us all to contribute to this such an important part, not just in corporates, but in for not-for-profit organisations as well. There is so much that we can do and so much that we can influence in this area, and that's what makes it important. And if that we're talking at the minute about areas such as today about business failure. But to me, the biggest areas going forward is all about corporate social responsibility. It's about diversity, on the boards of companies. It's about sustainability. So there's some fantastic, real interesting challenges coming forward in corporate governance that we must all be part of. Corporate failure is the smallest part of that, but. And the reason that I do this and give the story is because it covers all of the areas that we've talked about. But it should be seen as a positive thing for corporate governance about what we can do to companies, in terms of areas such as diversity and corporate governance responsibility, not just about failure of organisations.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank
Neil.
you very, very much. Listen, good luck to you all for the rest of the course. It's a great course. I'm so pleased that you're on this, and I look forward to seeing your exam papers at some point. But I wish you all the very, very best. So thank you so much indeed for your time this evening. And thank you, Trina.
And thank you, Neil. Thank you very much.
Right.
And I'll just end by saying, thank you all for joining for the live presentation. As Neil said, he'll make the slides available up on Moodle for you, so you have them to refer to. And the next time I will see you will be for our first revision session on the 11th of May. So only a couple of weeks to go on that. And look forward to seeing you then and going through that first revision session for your upcoming exam.
Great.
Have a lovely evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Neil.
you.
Thanks,
Very
Trina.
much.
Very, very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.